Let's please welcome Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here with you. Good morning. Thank you. It is a little bit of a daunting task amongst so many distinguished and eloquent public officials to be selected to speak today as the keynote speaker. And I think that pressure is made all the more acute by, where is he, our state auditor, John Dougal, because I know he's got his time piece out and is already clocking me to make sure I stay on or near my time allotment.
You have a 2-minute limit, is that?
Yeah. You know, we have a multiplier. If it's 2 minutes, it's really 10 minutes. I wanted to thank the many who prepared and put on this event today. You have a wonderful team here in Wasatch County Republican Party. Again, an amazing chair. And those who helped start our program off really set us off on the right tone. I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged, that I acknowledged. So the Rhythmic Studio Children's Choir, that was extremely inspiring. Wanted to thank the Magalays for their rendition of the Star Spangled Banner, our honor guard from the Heber City Police Department, and everybody else who participated. Matt for that wonderful invocation. I've been asked to speak this morning on promoting liberty in our great nation and other lessons that we can learn from that great president, Abraham Lincoln. And so my apologies to some of those of you who've heard me speak before, especially the public officials who've heard me speak dozens of times. Some of these stories you'll have to hear again, but I think they're appropriate to share. One other thing I do want to mention and acknowledge a couple members of my own team who came up this morning, Lee and John Reck, who have worked with me for years and years. And it's interesting because their son Charlie, during the last 2 campaign cycles, was the one who would come up at 6 o'clock or 6:30 to help set up all of the different booths up here. Charlie is in England right now and actually texted his parents and said, "You have to come to the Wasatch County Lincoln Day breakfast. It is that good. The breakfast alone is worth it. If you have to listen to the speakers, that's okay too. But you should definitely come." And so he convinced both mom and dad. And so I appreciate both of them being here. Abraham Lincoln said, "Our defense is in the preservation of the spirit which prizes liberty as a heritage of all men in all lands everywhere." And that is the keynote theme. Again, how do we as a people, as Americans, preserve liberty? I have a few different ideas based on some other quotes from President Lincoln. The first, let me introduce by telling you a story. A number of years ago, I was fortunate enough to be acknowledged with a national award. So representing the state of Utah, we went to California to receive this award, speaking in front of a large body of people, hundreds of the highest ranking members of this organization. It was a legal organization. Before I went to speak there, though, I had the chance, they asked me to give some keynote remarks before the presentation of the award. And so I sent my prepared remarks to them because they had asked me to preview them. And it was interesting. They sent me back a recommendation that I strike from my speech all the references that I had made to God. And they said, "Look, Sean, we know that's an important part of your life, but we think it's a little over the top. And who are these other people you're referring to? References to this Gordon Hinckley guy and some other people like that." And I said, "Well, these are people who are important to me. You've asked me to speak on what has influenced my life and made me who I am and brought me to the point that I am today. And I feel strongly that I want to include these references." And they again cautioned me and said, "Look, this is a crowd where that may not go over extremely well. And just to protect you, we want to make sure that you understand that you're taking a risk in doing that." And so I said, "Look, I don't want to present unless I can do it in the way that I feel is appropriate." And they said, "All right, go ahead." So it was interesting, after I gave that speech, how many people from that legal organization came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you so much for mentioning God We never hear references to God in these meetings, in these conferences that we have, and it was really refreshing to hear that. Abraham Lincoln said, "Be sure to put your feet in the right place and then stand firm." And Abraham Lincoln also has this famous quote that I'm sure you've all heard before too. "Sir, my greatest concern is not whether God is on my side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right." And so if there are two different points that I could leave with you to start off with in terms of preserving our liberty, I think that we need to be not afraid to stand up and invoke the name of God and to give thanks and recognition to the Almighty for His hand in the liberties that we have, and in order to preserve them, the liberties that we hope to continue to have over time. And that second point again is, if you have a correct principle and you know it to be true, then stand up for it regardless of what anybody else says. Another point that I wanted to emphasize in our efforts to preserve liberty in our nation, as we're standing up for these principles that we know to be true, as we invoke the name of God, let us do it in a way that's respectful, and let us show forth a great deal of love for God, for our country, and for our fellow men, so that they, seeing our example, will feel of that. I'm going to share a story about my family. Some of you know, my father hails from the Philippines. His family was involved in politics for a number of years. In fact, his godfather, his uncle, was President Ramon Magsaysay of the Philippines. And President Magsaysay was a well-beloved president of the Philippines. Having grown up as a blue-collar mechanic, he was a man of the people. And so when he became president, he opened up Malacanang Palace, the Philippine White House, to peasants so that they could literally come in the morning by the hundreds or thousands and talk to him about their issues and interact directly with the president and his advisors. Now, this is a tradition that he had. It worried his security detail a whole lot, but it was something that he was committed to. Now, there was a very powerful communist insurgency movement in the Philippines at the time that wanted to destabilize the democracy and the president. And they had trained a particular agent, one of their sleeper cells agents, to assassinate President Magsaysay. Now, there were 7 documented attempts on his life, all unsuccessful. Who knows how many other undocumented ones. But this is one of those documented attempts that I'm going to tell you about. One day, standing in line, pretending to be a peasant with a basket full of fruits to bring to the president, was this assassin who had trained for a couple of years with the sole mission to take the life of President Magsaysay. And instead of fruits in his basket, he had a weapon. And the idea was, as he got closer to the president, he would assassinate the president. He knew that his life would be taken by the palace guards, but then he would have accomplished his mission. As he got closer and closer, however, though, it took him a while to actually get up to be near the president. And he heard President Magsaysay interact with each child who came up to talk to him, bending down on his knees in his formal attire, listening and talking to children, listening to grandmothers and people in need. And in those moments, this cold, trained assassin, his heart was moved. And later on, he would say, "I had never felt so much love emanating from a single individual towards others, much less a public official." And he said, "I knew in those moments, even though philosophically, ideologically, we were totally different, that this man represented the greatest chance for success, not only for all Filipino people, or for all Filipino people, including my people." That's what the assassin said. So when it came time and he got close, instead of shooting the president, as was his plan, he tipped over his basket to reveal his gun and asked to be executed quickly. The palace guards were more than happy to oblige him. They had their guns trained on him and were literally about to take his life when President Magsaysay said, "Wait, please don't." He asked the would-be assassin to stand up, asked him if he would be willing to join his personal security detail. President Magsaysay said he sensed a lot of integrity in this individual. The assassin said he would, and for years after, he protected President Magsaysay and my family President died tragically in a plane crash a couple years later. But this old assassin, a guy named Manila Boy is what they called him, lived to a ripe old age in his 90s and always protected the former First Lady, my Auntie Luce. Why do I tell that story? Because I think that power of love that he talked about is something that we can all have, is something that we can all emanate in our service, whether as a public official that's elected, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're in your home and serving in your neighborhood. I think it is that kind of love that will unite our nation in a time of divisiveness and bring us closer together in protecting our liberties. President Lincoln said, "Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" And again, I think I would like to leave with you that thought from President Lincoln, that the transformative power of love is probably the greatest way to turn enemies to friends. When I came into the office, as Morgan, our chairman, our chairman said, it was a great deal of, there were a great deal of problems, and one of those was infrastructure. One of the first things we did as a leadership team in the AG's office was to interview some of the leaders throughout the office and also everybody else, rank and file, lawyers and other professionals. One of the groups of people that I talked to were the janitors who clean the Capitol. And like some of you, I'm fortunate enough to be able to communicate to them in Spanish, and many of them hail from Spanish-speaking countries. But it was interesting the reaction that they had when I first stopped them and said, "Can you come in and talk to me for a second? I want to know what you do." They put their hands up and said, "It's not us. We didn't do it. We didn't steal anything." And that was their reaction and response. How sad that they would think that we would want to talk them to accuse them. But I asked them what they did, and they said, "Well, we clean, and we mop, we vacuum, we do a number of things here." And I told them that in my mind, I thought they were as important as anybody else in our office, the lawyers, the paralegals, and asked them if they could do their jobs with passion and commitment, then they would make a difference in the office and our new administration. Now, they were a little surprised by that and taken aback, but I'm very serious about that. I think that whatever our position is, whatever our role is, if we do it with excitement, with enthusiasm, with passion, that it rubs off. And so I literally told them, if you're polishing the furniture, if you do that with commitment and enthusiasm, that will rub off on everyone else in the office. And President Lincoln said something interesting, very similar. He said very succinctly, "Whatever you are, be a good one." And that's always stuck with me. I've always thought. And so I turn it back to you. You may be a public official. You may be an elected official in the party. You may be a delegate. You may be a donor. You may be someone who is contributing in your community in other ways. Whatever it is you do and whatever role you have, be passionate about it. That will rub off on others. It will make our party stronger. It will make our nation stronger. And with that strength, again, we can preserve the liberties that we cherish. Let me end with one more quote from President Lincoln and some thoughts about further preserving our liberties. Now, President Lincoln said, "If slavery is not wrong, then nothing is wrong." We all know him historically as a great fighter against slavery, an abolitionist. We read about in our history books that slavery was abolished by the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. Now, some vestiges and some forms of slavery absolutely were, but today I want to orient you to some other forms of slavery that still exist, that are keeping people in bondage and preventing them from enjoying all the liberties that they could. One is literally modern day slavery, human trafficking, which some of you have heard me speak about before. Now, this is a heinous evil that exists with some estimates of 40 to 46 million people worldwide, thousands here in our country, in our state of Utah, who are subjected to labor trafficking, sex trafficking, all sorts of horrible manifestations of human trafficking. But let me also mention, there are addictions. Opioid addiction right now is rampaging through our country. It is ravaging not just our youth, but men and women throughout the nation. And it's not just for druggies, homeless people, all of these things that for many years we perceived to be the most vulnerable populations. It's affecting everyone. Soccer moms, working dads, another form of bondage. Similar to that, pornography addictions. This is another phenomenon that has swept the world. People's minds and then their hearts are locked into this great battle with addiction, where their own free will is restricted. Talking about a few other things, depression and suicide. One often leads to the other. And in our state, sadly, we are at the very top in the nation of teen suicide rates. Suicide rates for our brave men and women who've served in the armed forces. The number of vets who commit suicide every day. In fact, it's astounding. They estimate 20 to 30 a day are taking their lives. One statistic I heard, more veterans of the conflicts in the Middle East have now died from suicide than from combat. And so you take that type of bondage, depression, other types of mental health challenges, and each one of us has the ability to make a difference in helping to liberate our friends, our family members, our neighbors from these various forms of bondage. I don't have time to talk about all the many different ways, but again, think about those. Trafficking, addictions, intergenerational poverty, some of the things that many in this room have worked on to find solutions. Now, these are not necessarily a Democrat or Republican issue. They are humanitarian issues that we need to come together on, show forth a great deal of love to preserve these liberties. But why not have the Wasatch Republican Party, the Utah Republican Party, our Republican Party nationwide lead out in helping to come up with solutions and helping to come up with ways to liberate our brothers and sisters from these various forms of bondage. I was very proud that our president, President Trump, just 2 days ago, said that it was going to be a priority for his administration to eradicate once and for all the evils of human trafficking. That shows a commitment from highest elected public official, and I hope that each of you will find ways to reach out. Sometimes it's just a kind word, sometimes it's just a visit. People are in bondage all around us, whether we realize it or not, and I think that's a critical aspect of liberty that sometimes we don't speak about enough. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you again for everything that you do. Again, whatever it is that you do, wherever you are, do it with passion. Love is truly transformational. We can preserve these God-given liberties, proudly standing and invoking His name, which I do. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you.